Welcome to the Prevent the Preventable podcast, where we're on a mission to change the landscape of brain hemorrhages by driving awareness, delivering education, and pushing for real action. Now, brain hemorrhages affect millions of lives every single year. But at the Nathy Kate Moss Trust, we're committed to preventing them before they happen and funding pioneering research to advance treatment for when they do. In this podcast, we'll dive deeper into the world of brain hemorrhages because the more we understand, the more we can create real change, and together we can truly prevent the preventable. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Prevent the Preventable podcast. Now, let me dive straight in. Today, we are going to be talking about something that often gets overlooked in the conversation around brain hemorrhages. What happens next? When the hospital stay ends, the monitoring slows down, and the outside world seems to move on. What does recovery really look like? In this episode, we're going to explore that reality, the physical, the cognitive, the emotional, and the deeply personal journey of rebuilding life after a brain hemorrhage. Because it is so much more than medical appointments and milestones. It's identity, it's relationships, it's navigating a new normal. Today, we will be joined by Dominic Cassidy, who has lived this journey himself and is generously sharing his story of his recovery after his brain hemorrhage. And alongside him, we'll hear from Claire Needham from BrainKind, the UK's leading charity in helping people to thrive after a brain injury by providing innovative rehabilitation and ongoing support to ensure life after brain injury can be a life well lived. Today, we will be covering what challenges survivors face, the emotional toll on returning to work or managing family life post-injury, the importance of redefining purpose and identity after something so life-altering, what support is available post-brain hemorrhage, and what the pathway to recovery can look like. Now, at NKMT, we hear stories from so many individuals and families who are navigating this long road of recovery, often unsure of what's normal, what help is available, or even how to talk about what they're feeling. And that is why this episode in particular is so important. It is honest and it's grounded in both real experience and expert guidance. Now, before we jump into today's episode, if you yourself are navigating and recovering from a brain hemorrhage, I would highly suggest you go back to episode 7 of series 1, where Susie Lane also shares her powerful story about her brain hemorrhage and recovery. I also want to mention that if you are navigating your recovery and you are asking questions about the care you received and you need some legal advice, please don't think that you're alone and sit and wonder and question. We have a legal clinic on our website where you can register to have a free 30-minute call with one of our solicitor partners to discuss your concern and either put your mind at ease and know that everything was done as it should, or they can help you to better understand the best next steps for you to explore a medical negligence case. Now, just head to our website and our services page to find out more. That's www.nathykatemos.co.uk/services. But now on to today's episode, which is all about recovery, the messiness of it, the beauty in it, and the strength it takes to rebuild. Whether you're a survivor, a loved one, or simply want to understand more, this one's for you. Let's get started. Morning, guys. Morning, Dominic. Morning, Claire. Thank you so much for being here today. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about recovery post-brain hemorrhage. And the question being, can you fully recover from brain hemorrhage? And what does that look like? What does recovery, what does rebuilding life look like? Claire, you're here from BrainKind. I've obviously introduced both of you in the introduction. And Dom, you did experience a brain hemorrhage yourself, and we'll come on to that. And I actually want to come to you first, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
So you actually originally reached out to us wanting to share your story on our real life stories page on our website, which anyone can go and watch them or go and read themselves. In it, you said, and I quote, "I had a nice, busy life, like many people. I'm a husband. I'm dad to 3 kids. I co-own my own recruitment business. I'm fit and healthy. I like running. And that's why what happened last June was a real bolt out of the blue."
Yes.
What was life like before June 2024?
Very much as described. I had and still do have a really busy life. 3 children aged now between 8 and 14. 10 years ago, with a couple of work colleagues, we set our own business up, and we've been able to grow that to 30 odd heads in several locations across the UK. And therefore family life and running a business always came with lots of responsibility, lots of challenges, lots of enjoyment as well. So my life was really busy. I enjoyed running as a bit of a switch off and a bit of me time as well. And that was probably maybe an irony or not, but actually my hemorrhage happened whilst I was running as well. So I was completely healthy and never had any symptoms whatsoever. And that sudden onset was quite it was a surprise, let's say. Yeah. It wasn't something that was to be expected.
So could you take us back to that moment? You mentioned there that you were running.
Yes. Yeah.
So what happened the day that you experienced your brain hemorrhage back in June 2024?
So I was on a treadmill. I knew I didn't have a lot of time, so I thought I'll try and maximise the time spent in the gym. So I put the treadmill on, probably faster than usual. And I was doing interval sprints and standing off interval sprints. And I think I might have even said on my piece that I wrote, the irony is when I finished, my immediate thought was, I feel really strong here. You know, I'd been able to cope with the excess. So when I got myself a water and suddenly I started developing a pain down both sides of my neck, and it felt really just uncomfortable. And I wondered if I'd strained myself, and then within seconds from nowhere, this intense headache came. You can only describe it as it was almost like someone had sliced away at the top of your head. And it just froze me in my tracks. Straight away, I was still lucid. I didn't lose my speech. I didn't lose movement or anything like that. And because I'm never really ill. One of my first thoughts was, is this a migraine? Because I wasn't aware of really brain hemorrhages and what the symptoms would be, or how common they were. That didn't even enter my mind. Actually, I thought, this feels really odd. I assume this is a migraine. I need to get myself home. And thankfully, Jen, my wife, phoned me while I was driving home. And I just said, look, I feel really weird here. I said, I just need to get home. I can't really talk. And she's like, you okay? And I think I just said the same thing again. And whatever that was, that just triggered something in Jen to think something's not right. So she packed the kids round the corner to a friend's house. And when I got back, I was just like, look, I'll go and lie down. I'm all right. And thankfully, Jen initially tried to phone 111. Didn't really, I don't think either side could really make sense. So she called 999. Then paramedics came and the journey began to a certain extent.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a lot in there that I think we could explore. But I think one of the biggest things and something that really stands out to me is Jen's response and her action. Because to your point that, you know, you don't know enough about brain hemorrhages, or you didn't even think it was a brain hemorrhage, you're questioning what it is probably extremely common.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, because, you know, we had an episode with a paramedic called Chris Ashton, and he talks about the importance of from onset of symptom to calling 999. That is the longest amount of time in the whole sequence of events, from getting somebody from the brain hemorrhage happening to getting to the hospital. Yeah. And I think it's because people don't recognise symptoms, because, you know, they just don't know what to do. Or to your point, you know, maybe I'll just lie down and I'll just sleep it off and I'll brush it off. But her response is absolutely the right one there, and obviously is shown dividends, you know, hopefully in all of this. And I think that's where there's the biggest challenge for many people, is actually just, I don't know what this is, so I just don't know what the right response is. But as I've mentioned, their time equals brain. So, you know, the quicker we act, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you then were taken to hospital in Salford Royal, is that right?
I was taken firstly to Wythenshawe, and it's at that point my memory and recollection goes a little bit, and I think some of that was probably down to painkillers and suppressants, as well as obviously what was going on. but I was scanned almost immediately in Wythenshawe. I just started going downhill really quickly. I remember being lay on a trolley, started vomiting. They kept asking me to categorise the pain, and by this point it was excruciating. And they then, I think they scanned me again. I might have had 2 scans, I think, in Wythenshawe. And then I was taken by ambulance to Salford and scanned again then. And I don't really remember anything beyond that until the Monday morning. So everything happened late Sunday morning, and it wasn't really until the Monday morning I then really worked out where I was and what was going on. But within that period of time, I'd been taken to 2 hospitals. I'd been scanned 3 times. The standard of care was fantastic, and it was clear very quickly that they knew what was the issue.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and this is where I'll probably come back to this many a time, where I feel quite lucky. I remember the neurosurgeon saying to me on the Monday morning what had happened. He said, if you want to choose one, that's the type you'll have. Because it was non-aneurysmal. So it was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It was non-aneurysmal. But thankfully I wasn't in any I wasn't in a life endangering situation.
Yeah.
It was all about, very quickly, it was almost all about the recovery. And that was within probably 36 hours of it happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're very fortunate, obviously, that is the case, and that you're here to support us to reach more people about, the importance of, one, recognizing, the symptoms, like you say, but having, more of this conversation. Because I think, going back to that point, the more conversations we have about it, the more we bang the drum and raise the profile of brain hemorrhages, the better, because when they do strike, people are a little bit more aware and have that knowledge, and they're already equipped with that knowledge in order to take the right action as well. So, like you say, that whole process was relatively quick, really. When I hear lots of stories, and there is a wide spectrum of severity of cases. To your point, subarachnoid is probably, arguably, not neither great, but arguably the better one to have. And you mentioned that recovery was then, the conversation started to lean more into recovery. So what did the next few weeks, those first initial months, look like for you? Hi, I won't take up too much of your time, but if you're listening, it's probably because you care about making a difference. And the truth is, we couldn't do any of this without you. Whether you've run a race, come to one of our events, whether you donate regularly, or have made a gift to us in your will, thank you. You're helping to fund life-saving research into brain hemorrhage treatment. Now, just £33.91 pays for 1 hour of research at the University of Manchester. That's 1 hour closer to improving survival rates and reducing long-term disability for thousands of people. And here's the thing, every pound makes a difference. In fact, if everyone who interacted with Series 1 of the podcast, whether by listening to it or downloading an episode, watching a YouTube clip, or one of our reels on Instagram, if all of those people donated just £1, we could fund half a year of research. And if you'd like to help, the link to donate is in the show notes. And it goes without saying, thank you for helping us save lives from brain hemorrhage. Now back to the episode.
Okay, so I spent 10 days in hospital. To an extent, that's almost been the template for what life and my recovery has been like. It was really variable. I'd have a day, it was almost like a day on, a day off in hospital. I'd have a day where I was all right, I would say, pain management and such. I wasn't allowed out of bed, I was laid down. But then the next day, I'd be convinced it was happening again, because the pain was excruciating, the sickness, and there was no consistency at all. It was almost like a day on, day off, day on, day off. After a couple of days, I was, for example, maybe 3 or 4 days after I did the cup of tea, make the toast test that they do. And I was okay, but I remember the day after that, it was the general election. I was still in hospital then, and I literally couldn't take my head off the pillow. So it was really variable. And And I almost set the template for coming home, and even now, 15 months down the line, is very, very inconsistent. You know, the severity is much less than it was, but the nature of how you recover, and actually the onset of new symptoms as others disappear, I wouldn't say surprises me, but I think if I go back to the point that the surgeon said, if that's the type you're going to have, you want to choose to have that one. I think that probably just set something in my mind as well. I'm okay. You know, I was in and out of this really quickly, space of a couple of days. Hopefully, therefore, my recovery should be above average, for example. But I've got no concept of what average is in that. And I think I've mismanaged my own expectations to think, well, I got over that okay. My recovery will be ahead of schedule as well. And it's not. And whilst it's manageable, it's so variable. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm keen to do this, is to say that the symptoms are so varied, that the days are so different as well, that and it is important to be able to recognise that as well.
I think that's a common not necessarily problem, but difficulty to kind of navigate going through anything medical, is that there's never a clear timeline. You know, whether you're overcoming an illness or whether you're in recovery for a hemorrhagic stroke, you almost want to be like, right, okay, well, if I do X, that'll equal Y. And it's not always, it's not always that straightforward. It's not always a calculation. So I can imagine there's a lot of emotional challenges that come within that, which we can certainly touch on. But Claire, if I can just come to you from your experience, typically, what would those first few weeks look like for somebody recovering from a brain hemorrhage? Does what Dom's describing kind of sound similar to what you would have seen?
Really resonates with the fact that there's not one typical path. It's not a typical fit. Everybody's different. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's outcome and symptoms are very different. Therefore, there's not a kind of a very typical pathway. It's for everybody, it's very different, and it's a process for them, and it's about adjusting to their life, really. And I think it's overwhelming, isn't it, in those first few weeks of really trying to get your head around what's happened, trying to think about what the future's going to look like, what the next few weeks, what the next hour's going to look like, particularly on those days when you don't feel great. And that's a kind of a very typical experience. Is some days are good, some days are bad, some months are good, some months are bad. As you go through your rehab journey, it's very, very atypical, really. And I think what's really important, what people tell us, is that you have knowledge and information very quickly so that you can manage those expectations and you can kind of start to think about understanding what's happened to you, what's happened to your brain, and what's kind of going to happen in the future. But yeah, there is absolutely no typical pathway, and because there can't be, because everything is so different for everybody. We have to be really flexible.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So Dom, what were some of the the cognitive but also physical challenges? Yeah, if you could name them, what was it that kind of came up for you specifically?
Yeah, I think from the cognitive side, memory loss has been a big one.
And is that short? Do you mind if is that short term, medium? Is that long term? Is that like you can't remember things from the past, or is it just like I can't remember what I did this morning?
Almost immediate.
Yeah,
really immediate. So my memory of anything pre-hemorrhage is absolutely fine. But it a lot of it was subconscious to an extent. I've had both family and friends say to me since then, in the month or so afterwards, I was repeating myself loads. I was asking the same question, and they obviously weren't flagging that because they didn't want me to be conscious of that. But that's evolved in time. Even now, I'll my phone's in my pocket. I'll think I need to check something. By the time I've rooted in, got my phone out and opened it, I've forgotten what I'm wanting to look at anyway. So it's the memory loss aspect is still there. It's manageable. It comes back. It's more frustrating than anything. It's not like I completely lose my thread.
Yeah.
But I'm not able to act on instinct like I used to be able to do. Mood swings, I think and that's evolved as well. I think I was probably a bit more snappy with the kids in, beyond, the first few months or so. My tolerance of noise and being asked to try and do two things at the same time, I'd almost just go into shutdown, and not in a dramatic way. You could probably just tell by my face or my response that I wasn't particularly comfortable.
And I hope you don't mind me asking, do you feel that was you say that there was like a response, there was like a mood change? Is that a response like, I can't do both these things and I'm frustrated that I now can't do these things? Or was it actually your mood would just change, which in a way you felt like you couldn't control that?
It's probably more the latter. It sounds a strange way to describe it. It's more like a fight or flight type of thing. It's more like I'd either have to take myself out of a situation, or it'd just be obvious by the look on my face that I'm struggling to actually cope with doing more than one thing at a time. I've probably learned to manage that as time's gone by, and I think it's probably less severe as well as time goes by. But even now, I'll maybe we'll come on to this later down the line in terms of what the longer term recovery is like. I can't do the job that I had pre-hemorrhage because that job involved spinning so many plates in a relatively loud and vibrant sales environment. Yeah. And I'm miles off that at the moment. And that's okay. I learned to find ways to cope, and I'm fortunate with the business I've built for myself that I can adapt. But that aspect is really, really different to how I was previously.
Yeah, and I'm sure that comes with a lot of, there's, elements of that, emotional particularly being one of them. And I'd like to kind of come on to that. But just on this memory loss and mood change and, probably fatigue as well, all those different sort of symptoms, that does seem to come up time and time again when we speak to people who have survived a brain hemorrhage. Claire, from your perspective, what advice would you give to, someone came to BrainKind and had these symptoms? What advice would you give to them to be able to manage those?
I think like we've already said, everybody's kind of journey is really, really different. And I think it's about building those things. So I think you've started to build some strategies around your memory and kind of helping you. And I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do. We don't have off the shelf strategies. The strategies that people can build for themselves are the best ones. So if you can think of a strategy that will help you with your memory, I think we as professionals, we as a society have to remember that society is not built for people who've got cognitive problems. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for a lot of us anyway, but it's overwhelming, isn't it? So it makes those things really more difficult. So it's how do we build those strategies, those coping skills that can help us manage all of those things in one. But even trying to work out how it's affected you, that's your first kind of port of call, isn't it? So what is it that I can't do again? What is it that I do find more challenging? And then how do we begin to build those strategies moving forward? Fatigue, that we have enough sleep, all of those kind of things. So it's really kind of that knowledge and information is the most powerful thing at the beginning, and then you can move forward from then. And that's why it makes it so different for everybody, because how I feel won't be the same as how you feel. And remembering that the world is an overwhelming place. And particularly if you've been through something like that, it really is overwhelming. You can see the difference from people, like I work in a residential rehab service, from people coping inside an environment that's quite controlled, quite quiet. Take somebody out and suddenly they're lost. Buses are going past. This is happening. The supermarket's a blaze of things, isn't it, really? So it's really just helping people through that journey step by step by step. It's taking a step at a time, isn't it? I know it's about managing those expectations, isn't it? You were talking so powerfully about this is the kind of hemorrhage you would want. That set your expectations differently, didn't it? And it's like making sure that we manage those and we support people along that. And that message you say around you have some good days and bad days is really powerful.
Yeah. I think, that you both said it, it's a journey, isn't it? And to your point before, Dom, you'd have some symptoms, they subside, then there'd be new symptoms, and it would kind of constantly be this ebb and flow. And I'm sure ebb and flow of progress, physical progress, cognitive progress, but then kind of, you're back and forth. And then there's the challenges with work and the practical challenges. Dom, what kind of not necessarily kept you going, but where did you find support and kind of focus and to kind of help you on that journey?
I've been lucky with who I've been surrounded by. So my family have been amazing and really, really understanding. My business and my colleagues have been as well. You know, I work with people I've worked with for 20 odd years. We own the business together. And I think that sense of familiarity and comfort, both professionally and, you know, personally around my family and friends has been everything to me, actually. I think it's allowed me to recover as I need to. Because I think I've got to be really, I want to be really clear in when I say this. You know, it was a sudden onset, and I was out of it relatively quickly. And I'll often sit and ask, you know, I think about it quite a lot. You know, I didn't have to go because I'd found a lump somewhere or there was a concern and wait for scan results. I haven't had to then be told I need a course of treatment for something. And I think of the illnesses and the situations other people face. I'm lucky that way. You know, it was sudden onset. I was out quickly, and therefore, as I keep telling myself, my recovery is really, it's down to me. It's down to how I focus and rationalize what's happened to me. And maybe to a certain extent, I might be going off on a tangent a little bit here, Claire. I look at the work that your charity does. I look at the work, Fiona, that Natalie Kate Moss Trust does. I don't always see myself as being the most worthy need for that, because I don't necessarily think my symptoms are as severe as others. But that's partly why I wanted to do this, is to say, look, that's all right. And the whole thing is a bit of a journey anyway. But what am I now, 15 months down the line, and it is still, you know, it's really inconsistent. It's really hard to predict how it's going, and I've now found peace with the fact I'm not going to put a time scale on this. I'm just going to accept that it's variable and it will go along. But coming back to the original question, I think the reason why I think I've been able to cope with all of that is because the support networks around me from family and friends, and, you know, the information on the websites and such like has really helped.
Huge thank you to Colony Co-working for continuing to support the Preventable podcast. Now, at the Natalie Kate Moss Trust, we have a huge ambitions to completely change the landscape of brain hemorrhages. And whilst we're a small but mighty team, we are all working remotely. And in truth, that's part of our strength. Remote working means that we can connect with incredible talent from across the UK and around the world, helping us push forward faster and smarter. But without a central office, we need flexible, inspiring spaces where we can come together to work productively, collaborate meaningfully, and work on this huge goal we have set ourselves. That's where Colony comes in. Colony is a growing network of beautifully designed co-working spaces here in Manchester, home to creatives, founders, freelancers, and teams of all sizes. They are spaces built for focus, connection, and progress. Not just a place to work, but an environment that actively supports your growth. And they've helped NKMT do just that. To find out more about how Colony could support your business, check the link in the show notes. There's so much humility in that, you know, and there's so much kind of, you know, the point you're making, like, do I kind of, you know, deserve in a way, you know, that kind of focus as much as somebody else who's had a intracerebral hemorrhage, and, you know, they're really, you know, the severity of their disability post brain hemorrhages, you know, awful, and or they passed away. You know, as I said before, there is a spectrum of how somebody is affected by hemorrhagic stroke. I don't think, you know, you can say one is worse, better, you know, or whatever than the other. What I would say is I think that your mindset and your kind of positive mindset, I would say, probably does stand you in really good stead. And I think in any really difficult situation, that will always help you, more than not. And like you said, having that support around you of what friends and family can do to support you as well. And we do have a question, and I did have a question around what that support is. I'd like to just kind of jump to that. On a practical sense, what did that support look like for you? And then Kai, I'd like to come to you as well and kind of say, like, what advice would you give to families that you see all the time, and the differences that one family could make to a patient versus another as well? So Dom, what's the family on a real practical sense? What did that look like for you?
There's probably two ways I'd look at it. The support I received, I hope I'm not going off on a tangent here, but the support I received from Salford Royal, for example, there was a specific program aimed around the psychology around how you're feeling, and exploring various symptoms and very common factors as well. And that was done in a group session, and it was really useful in loads of ways. One, for me to remind myself, actually, I probably haven't had it as tough as others have had. But also just the real variety of things that were there. In terms of the support I've received from my family and friends, a lot of it's just been through talking. I would say just, I don't want to. Talking has really helped. The sense of empathy that people have shown to me has really helped as well, and understanding as well, because it's very easy, and I think this is probably the case with many brain injuries, it's very easy to not realise what's going on behind the eyes, if that makes sense. So many times with really good intentions, people would say, "You're looking really well," and you'd smile and say thank you, and internally you're like, "I don't really feel it," but that's just the nature of it. It's well intended. But I think that's the thing that's really struck me is maybe with any neurological condition, or however you categorize it, it's not necessarily how you look, it's how you feel, and that can be really variable. And my family, I think, I've got in tune with that pretty quickly, as of my work colleagues as well. So
I think it sounds like you've got a great support network, which has obviously helped you a lot, which is fantastic. I think I can imagine for a lot of people that they struggle. You made the point there about brain injury. You can't see it. You can't. Someone's got they're on crutches, or their arms in a sling, or whatever it is. It's maybe easier to converse. Conversing with them is easy. You can talk to them. I feel like with a brain injury, there's maybe a taboo. People don't know how to approach someone. They don't know what their moods are like. They mention that. So you kind of walk on eggshells a little bit. And I think that's where there's a challenge in itself, because obviously, as you said, talking is actually really, really helpful.
Yeah.
But I think the support of other people might not know what to say. And I think there's a real challenge and a contradiction between that as well. So, but Claire, as I said before, what is it that you see? What are the families that you think are maybe supporting in a really good way? What are some commonalities between them?
I think what's really important is I think what you were talking about before is that a lot of these things are hidden. And I think with brain hemorrhages, we're just getting to the point where, it's very similar to a brain injury, some of the things that we see around cognition and things like that. I think for families, I think the biggest really support that we can kind of give to people is that, you need to all care for yourself. You need to take time. This is life-changing, and this is really different. And, your life is going to be different. And therefore everybody's life in the family is going to be different, and therefore it is a whole thing. We at BrainKind, we actually do a lot of education with families. We talk to obviously families, and I think one of the really important things is something that you've maybe talked about, is that families are involved. You involve them in the rehab. It's not something that happens to you, it's something that happens to all of your family, because like you say, you're going to forget things sometimes, and they need to understand that. Busy families, you've got to do this, it's like, well, no, this is how life is now. We have to kind of adjust. We have to change. As a family, we have to kind of think about that. And I think what we would say to family is, it is uncertain. We don't know what that's going to look like, but you need to work together to kind of get there. And I think it's really, like you were saying, it's about that reaching out to others, people like yourselves, different charities, go to places, talk to people, get the help that you need, because none of us can pour from an empty cup. You can't, your family can't. So it's really important to involve them. It's really important to involve your children. Some great resources, videos out there for kids to watch to kind of say, this is how mum and dad are going to be in the future. And kind of involve them. It really is important to kind of support everybody. And ask for help. Really ask for help. It is there.
Yeah. Where is it?
I think it's charity. There is gaps. There's massive gaps, and I think it's trying to navigate your way through that, isn't it? It's leaving hospital, but it's making sure that we still have to educate people to make those links. That there's good charities out there. There's your charity. There's BrainKind. There's Brain Charity. There's Headway. There's so many things out there that we really need to get that message across to people, and hopefully these podcasts will do that. That go out and ask, go out and find.
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, it's up to you, and you're not going to sometimes be given that on a plate, but go out and find these helps.
Yeah. We spoke about this before the podcast, didn't we, before we started recording? And actually, you're right, Claire. I think there are gaps. And I think, obviously, Anatomicate Moss Trust is around changing the landscape of brain hemorrhages. Our focus is preventing them and treating them better when they happen. There is a gap in the work that we do in that aftercare. How can we support some more people, post brain hemorrhage? Hopefully one day that will come, but right now there are so many amazing charities, but it does still feel a bit hazy, like where do I go? And so I think, the more we can, as you say, the more we can speak in podcasts like this, the more that we can get the right Google analytics, the SEO going, which is, I know how you found us, Dom.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's how do we, as I said before, bang that drum louder and louder and louder to make people more aware. So if they need us, they know it's there. You talked about kids. I just wanted to ask you, Dom, how old are your kids? Well, I was going to say how old were you when it happened, but it was only a year ago.
It was a year. So when it happened, my kids were 7, 11 and 13.
And how did you kind of explain it to them, what had happened?
It was different for each of them. So James, my middle child, probably until a couple of months ago, still referred to it as my migraine, because I think that was what Jen had spoken to him about in the early days of me being in hospital, and they'd been shipped off to mates and no one was quite sure what was going on. Grace, who's my eldest daughter, I think understands it a lot more.
Yeah.
Probably naturally because she was a little bit older than the others too. And Sammy, our youngest, I think he's probably too young to comprehend it really anyway. He knows I was in hospital, he knows I wasn't well, but the context and the reasons why he doesn't. So it was different for each of the three of them, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's, there's so many parts to this, isn't there? It's not just, an individual has a hemorrhagic stroke and that individual that works on their recovery. When we're talking about rebuilding your life, recovery after brain hemorrhage, to your point, Claire, it's about the bigger picture, because you are in a family, in a workplace, whatever. You're one part of a bigger piece. And I think when you're trying to navigate your own new your own new identity, equally your environment, your family, your colleagues have also got to adapt to that new version of you as well. So there are so many layers to that too. So can we just talk about identity for a moment then as well? And Dom, particularly, how did you come to terms with the new you, so to speak, and redefine who you are, post your hemorrhage, in, not just from an individual point of view, a dad, a husband, but also at work as well?
Yeah. I think my honest answer to that is I don't think I have come to terms with it yet. And I don't mean that, I'm at peace with that and I'm okay with that, but I think it's still part of the ongoing recovery process, really. various elements I've found hard. You know, I've always been a hard worker, whether that was at school or whether that was in professional life. Now I've sort of got to where I've got to by grafting, really, by working hard, and to not be able to do that has been quite hard to rationalise as well. I can't work as hard as I used to. I don't have the capability, and also, Claire, I think to come back to your term, like you can't pour from an empty cup. I can't put everything into work because I've got nothing left then for family life as well. So I think it's a journey that I'm still on to a certain extent. The work element has been quite hard. You know, I've owned and led a business of multiple people, and I've built that business, and not to be able to do that for now, you know, who knows in the future, but for now, I don't see myself even being close to be able to do that again. That takes a little bit of rationalising as well. And socially, you know, I don't really feel comfortable going out drinking anymore because of the noise, because of the impact that can have, whereas that was a big part of my life previously as well. So, and probably the third element to that is my exercise. You know, I'm running again, but I've probably got a nice excuse now that I don't have to push myself anymore, so I can just plod along a bit more. But whether it's exercise, whether it's work, whether it's family life, everything's just a little bit different. So whilst I'm at peace with, you know, I'm so lucky with my surroundings, I don't think I've quite yet settled on, okay, what does this mean for me for the rest of my life?
Thank you to our sponsors, Hugh James Solicitors, for supporting this second series of the Prevent the Preventable podcast. Now, sudden brain hemorrhage can turn your world upside down, but discovering it was caused by a medical mistake makes it even more devastating. While nothing can change what's happened, Hugh James's medical negligence team is here to support those who suffered brain injury or bereavement due to medical errors. And their support doesn't end there. The Hugh James Wills and Estate team is also on hand to help you plan for the future with clarity and care, because when the worst happens, the last thing you need is added complexity. To find out more about how they can support you and your loved ones, head to the services page on our website and book a free call with them to discuss your concerns. You can find the link to all of that in our show notes. I imagine it's also quite, you know, you think about the timescale with all of this. 18 months is quite a short period. You know, you've got that probably initial year, which is just kind of coming to terms with it, kind of fully rehabilitating, and then you're here with us now, which, you know, I personally think is, you know, amazing, and I think you should be really proud of where you are and the fact that you are going for runs. You know, a lot of people aren't, to be honest, Dom. So, yeah, but I imagine that, you know, with all of that is really conflicting. You know, you've spent your whole life building, and then for it kind of to be altered in that way is really difficult as well. But we know about, you know, we just talked about the like psychological, the emotional toll of recovery as well. How important is supporting somebody in that mental health journey throughout all of this, and what types of therapy and resources can people kind of access, or are there any tools that you can share today?
I think it's really, really important, because I think the way we sometimes often talk about it is that people have to almost grieve for what they've lost. Is that, you know, you had something, now you don't. And I think particularly if people are more physically affected, you know, maybe they can't walk as well as they did, you know, those kind of things. You can't run as well as you did. It's kind of mourning all of that and that brings about, I would imagine, quite a lot of different feelings that we see with people in rehab. Some people are very, very angry, really angry that they have been left like this and that their life is so very different. And likewise, in the blink of an eye, can be absolutely bereft, can be so upset. So I think, you know, we have to accept that those kind of changing of emotions, the quickness of those emotions has its toll. You know, we know if we get angry, you're exhausted afterwards, aren't you? If you cry, you're exhausted afterwards. And to be able to do that in the blink of an eye is absolutely exhausting. And I think there is evidence that tells us people do suffer with their mental health post any kind of brain injury, post a hemorrhage, because you feel sad. You feel, you know, you can be more prone to feeling sad about the things that you've lost. So I think we very much build into our programs in rehab in BrainKind around good mental health and how we look after our mental health and how we acknowledge that and how we acknowledge that's going forward. Obviously, if you're not in a rehab centre, the GP is a really good place to go and to have those conversations very quickly, because there is help out there. There's CBT, there's all sorts of things that we can access, lots of things online that we can look at, but really, accessing your GP in those early stages if your mood is really affected and you really can't kind of bring it up. I think there's, things like it's knowing who you are. It's going back to that knowledge and that information of working out, well, how has it affected me? How has it kind of, and acknowledging that those changes have taken place and that there is challenges there, that you will have some good days and bad days, and not thinking it's a backward step. It isn't. It's just part of your journey, really. But working out what makes you anxious. You've said big noisy pubs, don't like them anymore. So, is that a trigger for you? So how are you going to cope with that if you do have to do that? Work, what's going to trigger you at work? Is it a noisy office? Can you find somewhere quieter to work? Can you work from home occasionally? All of those things, and articulating that to people, being honest with people. Can you just turn that music down a little bit? Can you just can we just have a bit of a quiet time, really? I think lots of people find a lot of comfort in routine.
Yeah.
Does my day look okay? Yeah. So what's my day? I get up at 8, I do this, because I think it's something that you can achieve. I think we all feel great. It's basic CBT, isn't it? I've done that today. I've done that. I've got up, I've got dressed, I've got to work. I've done my first task. So I think those routines and planned activities are really good for people because they give you that kind of anchor to hold on to, don't they? And working out that kind of what switches you off, what brings you some peace and some calm. Is it music? Is it watching a film? Is it chatting? Is it, running? Is it cycling? Whatever it is, and building all of that. And I think it goes back to the fatigue bit. Brains get tired. So what's a priority for you today? How much time do you need to give to that? And how much time can you have some downtime? And if you need downtime, take it and explain that. I'm not withdrawing or, being a bit snappy because of this. My brain's tired and I need to go take some time out. So I think it's just all of those little tricks that you kind of learn, that we all learn, to kind of just manage those things. But I think get help if you need it. What I like about BrainKind and what I like about its approach and what I like working at BrainKind is that we really, really look at the life that you want to lead. And it's never too late. Like, people who've slipped out of the system sometimes, it's about, it takes time, but it's never too late. It's never too late to start that journey back to where you want to be. And I think that's what's really important, is that it's your life. It's never too late. Let's take some time and let's build what you need to do back. And I think that's what BrainKind does really, really well. Need it. Really.
I think that's actually really helpful, and I think that's really practical advice as well for people to kind of take away and go, what are my triggers? What's my downtime? Yeah. Even just building out your day. I do that plenty of times, write a list to make sure that I'm just like on top of it as well. I imagine though, for some people, they might, we talked about this earlier. There's this kind of, you want to return back to normal life, so to speak. You want to be who you were, the person the person you're familiar with.
Absolutely.
But then when you're kind of having to constantly be, am I checking into that? Am I going to that group? Am I going to that? It feels like you're constantly faced with the fact that you're recovering and rebuilding your life from a brain hemorrhage. And whilst it's so important to acknowledge it and not sweep it under the carpet, how do you maybe stopping it from consuming you completely and just kind of allowing yourself to just be, and you've used a really nice word, peace, Dom, how do you be at peace with it rather than it overwhelming you, so to speak?
I think it will be overwhelming. It will be overwhelming at times, and I think it is building the kind of, it's a journey like we always talk about. Some parts of that are overwhelming and some parts aren't. I think certainly the model we use in our rehab is that we do have a great focus on what is it that you want your life to look like? What is it that you want to achieve? Do you want to go back to work? Do you not want to go back to work? Do you want to live with your family? Do you want to live here? Do you want to live there? And they might not be choices that people would recognise, but they're your choices. So how can we actually make that part of, and I think it's really important that there's a balance in your rehab, that yes, we do the hard work, we do that, but there's also finding those things that help you find that peace. So we take people out to the cinema, we use the community resources that we have, because I think it is really important to have some fun and have those downtimes as well as doing the hard work. So I think any rehab has to build that in. What's your hobbies and interests? What were they beforehand? Can we still do those? If we can, does it have to look different? Yes, going back to running, but you need to run a bit slower. You don't need to run as often. You can't go as far. All of that kind of stuff. But let's get back and do it. There's great things out there, isn't there? Like park run. You can go and volunteer. You can go and run. You can go and walk. It's finding those things that you get some enjoyment out of. We have people who get up, don't want breakfast with us. They go out and have breakfast, come back, start their sessions, then they go out again. It's really finding that balance, and having that joy in your life, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I used to refer to this in like work that I used previously to do as like a toolbox. Sometimes it's really helpful to just know what you can reach in for and what's going to help you, and whether it's, as you pointed out earlier, whether it's watching a film, whether it's going for a run, whether it's any of these things, but having those moments of going, I need that tool to calm me down, or I need that tool to give me a sense of peace, or whatever it may be, and reaching in. So no, I think that was really helpful, and hopefully really practical tips as well for people too. I do just kind of want to finish with Dom then. So we started the podcast with talking about your blog, and the opening line on it was, overall, I'm very lucky. And I think you said that a number of times today. And I'm sure for many people who've been through what you have been through, they might say they aren't lucky. Why me? Why if I'm the one that has experienced this? I didn't do anything wrong. I was healthy. I was running, But it sounds like, you've got a really good perspective on it as well that's helped you through. Has your perspective on life, on what's important and, priorities changed at all through all of this?
Yes, it has. And for the better as well. Not that it, not that it needed to improve, if that makes sense. It's probably just sharpened my senses of what's important. And I will always maintain that in context. I'm lucky. I've never, touch wood, and I don't think I will, I've never sat and been angry as to why me, because so many different things can happen to people in their lives, and whilst my recovery is a bit frayed around the edges and my life is a little bit different, ultimately I'm still the same person. I've just got to make a number of, whether they're temporary or long-term, adaptations to or adapt to what my life was like previously. So I think from that point of view, I probably do. It's strange. The easy answer for me to give, and it is absolutely genuine, is to say, I really have a much greater degree of great gratitude for what I've got around me, my life, my family, my health as well. And I'm grateful for that. But I'd be lying if I said I don't have to often remind myself of that. It's probably just your mind can wander a little bit, and it's not anger with what happened to me, but it is a bit like, I'm fed up with this. But then actually it is just whether I'm out walking the dog or whether I'm doing something. It's just, hang on a minute, I'm all right here. And in a strange way, there's positives to have come out of it. I'm home and around the kids a bit more at a time when they're growing up. I'm spending a little bit more time to myself. The dog's probably counting as lucky stars because it's getting walked way more than way more than she used to. So, strange as it sounds, there's positives have come out of it as well, in terms of how I view my life and everything that's around me as well.
Yeah, I think if you can find those glimmers, it's it'll really help you through such a dark time as well. To Claire's point before, it is a form of grief, isn't it? Not because you've lost somebody, but because you've in a way lost some things and some elements of your life. So I think with any type of grief, what we look for is glimmers, positive things that are positive or can bring a sense of gratitude as well. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this really honest conversation about what recovery from a brain hemorrhage really looks like. I hope that today's episode has helped shed light on the challenges survivors face, from cognitive and emotional struggles to identity shifts and the long road of rebuilding, but also on the support that is out there and the possibility of a meaningful, fulfilling life after brain injury. A huge thank you to Dominic for bravely sharing his lived experience, and to Claire from BrainKind for her expert insight and practical advice. And if you'd like to learn more about the support BrainKind offers, you'll find the links in our show notes. As always, if this episode resonated with you, please do consider sharing it with someone who you might think might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode in this series. Don't forget that every episode we'll ask our guests a special bonus question that you definitely don't want to miss. And today we actually asked them, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's just starting their recovery journey, what would it be? To see their answer, simply visit our Instagram channel and join our Change Collective broadcast channel, where we offer bonus content, the latest updates, and opportunities to get involved in supporting our work at the Natalie Kate Moss Trust. Now, next time, we'll be speaking to registered nutritionist Nicola Good and asking the question, can diet help prevent a brain hemorrhage? But until then, take care and thanks for listening.